Hello students, thanks for watching. Today we're going to talk about stakeholders. It used to be, if you ran a business, all you really had to do was care about your shareholders. And these people were really only worried about profits. And so if you go back to the Industrial Revolution and to the early times, the only expectations that people would have of a business is that they should make a profit and they should earn money for their shareholders. However, in our globalized world, the way we look at it today is based more on stakeholders than it is on shareholders. And we believe that businesses have responsibilities to many people in the world beyond those who own the company and benefit from the profits. They need to worry about this guy and that guy, and they should worry about profits, but it's definitely not their number one priority. So, as students of business management, you need to be familiar with 9 different stakeholder groups. Let's start talking about them now. The very first we have are naturally the employees. These are people who work with the business. We have managers, people who oversee the employees, and yes, we have shareholders. These are 3 of our stakeholder groups that have an interest in what the business does directly. So we refer to them as internal stakeholders. They work within the company. Our external stakeholders, we have pressure groups. These are groups that are united for a particular cause and want to put pressure on a business. We also have the government. The government has a vested interest in what the business does. We have suppliers. These are people who supply the business with what they need to operate. We have customers. Naturally, a business needs to consider the needs of their customers. We have banks, and we also have competitors. So these are our 9 stakeholder groups: employees, managers, shareholders, pressure groups, government, suppliers, banks, competitors, customers. And it will really benefit you as students of business management if you can recall all 9 of these groups. Particularly when you're taking your exam, you are very likely to face a question directly related to stakeholders. So, one tip you might try in order to memorize all 9 of these groups is to use a mnemonic device. And a mnemonic device that I thought of is: emergency medical services could start bringing people government cheese. It's possible, and it could happen, and it's very memorable. And maybe it's slightly American. We are kind of obsessed with government cheese for some reason. But this is a good way for you to remember this sentence and hopefully remember all of the stakeholder groups. If this doesn't make any sense to you, that's fine. Maybe something like every minute spent studying probably could be a good choice. I like the one about cheese, so I'm going to use that. And how I would recommend you do it is kind of remember this sentence and write down the first letters: EMS, CS, BP, GC. And then once you do that, you can remember all of these groups a little easier. Now, if you can do this and write down your 9 stakeholder groups very quickly on an exam, you'll have a really valuable resource right there in front of you to refer to use these terms and to apply them to some of your larger questions. So let's talk about these groups real quick because each one of them have their own interest. So first, our employees. Employees, it's natural to expect that they want job security, fair wages, safe working conditions. They also might want some participation in the decision-making process of the business. The business responsibility to those stakeholders is essentially provide these to them and follow the law. We're going to notice a pattern here. The next group to talk about are managers. Managers are very similar to employees. In fact, they are employees, but they have a slightly different function that we'll talk more about later. They also want job security, fair salary, benefits, and safe conditions, but they also want the status that goes with being a manager. They want responsibilities and advancement. If you have managers and you don't give them any responsibilities or any special treatment, believe it or not, they will be pretty unhappy. They also might like some possibility of profit sharing or share purchase, and we'll talk a little more about that. Once again, the responsibility to them is to provide these and to follow the law. Shareholders, we've talked about them, and they are interested in getting their annual dividends. Dividends are a share of the profit that a business makes that is given annually to shareholders. They want to know that their investment is secure. They want their share prices to be rising all the time, not going down, and they like the ability to sell their shares anytime they like. Now, the same responsibility to them, follow the law, provide what they want, but also, as we see in bold, they need to provide their annual accounts to their shareholders. This is something that will come up several times in the course. If you're a shareholder, you do have access to some of the financial information of the company, and they need to provide that to you. So those are our internal stakeholder groups. Let's talk about the next one, customers. It's pretty natural to understand what customers want. We are all customers, and we want value, quality, safety. We don't want to buy dangerous products that will break and cost too much money, clearly. And we have a responsibility to this group as a business. In the same way, follow the law, provide what people want, but also to operate ethically by not taking advantage of vulnerable customers. Now, what do we mean by that exactly? There are many instances where you'll see companies who might charge a lot of extra money for a medicine when people are dying or they need it very badly, or if there's a hurricane, then you can charge 10 times for water. But we expect you to not do that stuff. So that's one thing that businesses do have a responsibility to their customers, is to not take advantage of them. Other than that, businesses have this similar responsibility to them, follow the law, give them what they would like. Let's look at the next group, which are suppliers. Suppliers are businesses that are going to supply you with what you need. You are essentially their customers, and they would like their payments to come in on time. They prefer consistent, regular orders, and they want fair treatment. So if you are a very large company and they are smaller, they don't want to be bullied or taken advantage of. The same responsibilities to them, follow the law. Next, we have our banks. Banks are pretty predictable. They want you to repay the loans on time. That's the business that banks are in. We have pressure groups. Now, pressure groups, there are a lot of them out there. They are the people that we have discussed in previous chapters. They will protest you. What they really, really want is to change your business practices if you're doing something they don't approve of. They also want you to act in the best interest of the community. Now, the business responsibilities are slightly different. Clearly, you have to follow the law. But one thing that's pretty important is that businesses should recognize the legitimacy of pressure groups' concerns. You don't have to do what they want, but we do expect that you recognize that their concerns and that their requests are valid. This is similar to if someone apologizes to you and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry that you're upset." Well, that's not a real apology. And so if you are a business and there's a pressure group out there that is upset with what you're doing and they want you to change, you don't want to go, "Oh, I'm sorry that you're upset." You should at least recognize that their concerns are valid and legitimate. Also, please don't pollute or damage the local community. Next, we have the government. And the government is both simple and complicated. The government has an interest in businesses because businesses benefit the economy. Businesses provide jobs. Businesses improve the GDP, the gross domestic product of the nation. And so government has a very strong interest in businesses and what they do. They also expect you to pay taxes and to do things in a sustainable way. Once again, you need to follow the law. But above that, you need to keep accurate records of what you're doing, and you provide them upon request to the government. So if the government would like to see your financial statements, they can request it, and you need to show it to them, or you will be in a lot of trouble. The last one we have are competitors. Now, it may seem strange that competitors are on this. What responsibility do you really have to your competitors? And essentially, you need to follow the law. They're interested that you are competing fairly. If they are following the law and you're not, that's not going to be good for them. So if you're a business and you are following the law, you expect other people to do the same. So those are the interests and the responsibilities of the 9 stakeholder groups. And the next thing we really need to talk about is managing stakeholder conflict. There are many times when your employees will be upset with you, management will be upset with you, outside groups will be upset with you, and we need to know that it is possible to operate your business in a way that benefits everyone. Now, it's very difficult, but it's something that can be done. And what the book does is gives us 4 tactics, 4 ways that you can manage stakeholder conflict. The first one is through arbitration. Arbitration is essentially when I have a disagreement with, say, my workforce, my employees, we can have our disputes resolved by hiring an outside person to come in to hear both sides of the arguments and then to make a decision. It's almost like a court, but it's something that we would do before we go to court. And we can listen to what they have to say, or we can agree that it will be binding and that it must be accepted. So if my workers are on strike and what they want is more pay, and I say, I can't pay you, I don't have enough money, then maybe an arbitrator, an outside person, could come in through arbitration and can listen to what they want and can listen to me and what I can do, and then they can make a decision probably somewhere in the middle. Now, not everyone's going to get what they want. It will be a compromise, and sometimes people have a problem with compromise. But in general, if you want to minimize conflict and you can get 2 groups to compromise, that's the best way to do it. So the next one that we have is worker participation. Now, this is a method of resolving disputes by allowing workers to actually have a say in the decisions of the business. For example, if the business wants to open a new market, then the workers might actually have a way to contribute to making that decision. This is clearly beneficial for your workers. They will be happy. This will reduce conflict, both in the short term and long term. However, some people complain that worker participation is really just a waste of everyone's time, and that it's really just for show, and that workers should work and managers should manage, and that's how it should work. But this clearly leads to less conflict. The third one we have is profit sharing. This is very simple. You can share your annual profits to your workers before the shareholders receive their dividends or their profits. So if a company makes a great deal of profit, then they can share some of that with their workers, and the workers are happy. And the workers have more of an interest in the company succeeding and the company doing what's best for them if they are sharing in the profits. One problem with profit sharing schemes is that if you give some profits to your employees before you give them out to your shareholders or anyone else, naturally there will be less to go around, and they might be unhappy with that decision. Very similar to that is shared ownership. So this is a method of solving disputes by allowing workers a specific right to buy shares in the company, sometimes before other people get the chance to do it. So if you allow your workers to become part owners of the company, then very naturally they're going to be happier and they're going to have more of an interest in what the business does, and it can minimize stakeholder conflict. One problem with shared ownership schemes is that if you sell more shares to your employees on a regular basis, you're going to dilute your company, and there will be more people owning more little pieces of it. That means that each share becomes worth a little less. Now, these four ways of managing stakeholder conflict are particularly useful for questions that ask you to give advice or to suggest what a business should do. They might provide you with a question that says something like, Company X is having a lot of problems. Here are their problems. Suggest something for them to do. And any one of these that you can bring in and describe and apply to that company is going to be a really, really good way to answer the question. So I would look out for questions like that, and I would be ready to answer them. So that finishes our talk about stakeholders and stakeholder conflicts. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in class.